Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the T.O.A podcast. I am your host, Onvermel, and with me today I have, first off, I'm here, so congratulations, everyone. But today I actually have a How One with me today. No Zacta, no Ek. It's just a How One. How you doing?
Well, it's a Lego Saturday.
Oh yeah, it is Saturday. I don't know. I keep forgetting that individual fact of everything for some reason. Don't ask me why. That's something I forget. I just do. I just do. But like I say, it's been about over a year, I think, since the last podcast. I know it's been at least a year, but I think it's been a year plus some. And even just with any recording of videos, I've only had a couple out in the last couple weeks. So hopefully. But let's be honest, with the podcast, it came down to I ran out of topics as well as Steam at the same time. There's only so much topics you can talk about a dead theme that has like virtually no value. Now, despite what you may think, today is actually the minifig collectible minifig is not actually the main topic I wanted to bring up today. Surprisingly.
That is surprising.
Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, let's be honest. What so much can you really say about a Lego, into one individual minifig? It's not like it's a theme. It's not like it's a line of Bionicle collectible minifigs. It's literally just one guy. It's I don't think there's much to be said. It's a minifig Tahu. It's that. And like I'm pretty sure myself and Eck have already had a conversation about collectible minifig Bionicles way back in the day. That pretty much I think covers anything we'd say about it now.
The main interesting thing about it would be if Lego decided to do more with it. But by itself, this is just the third Tahu they've released in the last 5 years. I mean, it's getting to be repetitive at this point. I mean, I love me some Tahu, but
It'd be nice if they could build upon what they've already had and add a character to go with said Tahu, whether it be brick built Tahu, uh, buildable figure Tahu, or minifig Tahu. It would be nice to have a companion for one of them. At least with the Get GWP, you do have a T.O.A to go with it, and they have done a new stickered mask in a Ninjago set, so they've done a little bit more for that, but that's about the extent of that.
there are hints. But they could do a little more than
Uh,
hint.
Before I get to the main topic, I'll say one thing about the get to purchase, or sorry, the collectible minifig is the proportions of the collectible minifig work best for Pohatu because you don't really the minifigs already have naturally kind of wide hips, so really you don't need to worry about doing an inverted torso for Pohatu because the minifig torso is already close to what Pohatu has than others. The only thing you have to do is maybe don't do the shoulder pads to emulate the thinner shoulders he's got. But I don't know. Wide hips be wide hips.
Yeah, the thing looks good, but
It's a fig.
it's a fig. It's by itself. I mean, the thing I think that I like the most about it is the canister that he's holding.
I will say this. I do expect to see a recolor of the How, and very likely, I think in the next Ninjago City set, they'll have a lineup of canisters or something. That's what I expect to see. If they don't do a fig again, I expect them to see him do more canister prints. Because they don't have to do new mold or anything, it's just a print on a brick. And then the mask, I can see him either doing a gold version at some point. I don't think they'll do an infective because that's a printed, or that'd be a print on a something. But I could see him doing a gold How at some point in like again a Ninjago set, or if you had an adventure museum set, something like that. But I don't know. There's definitely possibilities there. But the more topic of today I want to get into that I was thinking about, and well, let's be honest, a lot of this came down with the release of the minifigure. Was kind of thinking why, what was, we all know a lot of the reasons Bionicle was popular as it was. I think it was just the uniqueness, the aesthetic, the I guess the blend between form and function of the sets. But one thing that I don't think or at least I have talked on the podcast, is something that I think Len made it as I would say as big of a hit as it was, might come down actually to the name of Bionicle and the characters. Because I was thinking about like what it was originally going to be was um Voodoo Head Island or something like that. Island of Voodoo Heads, I think, was the original working title. Maybe not the exact wording, but I know that was one of them, or Voodoo Head Island. It was one of something like that. And I'm just thinking, if Bionicle had, let's say, at the exact same sets as today, but that was the name of the theme, would it have gone past 3 years?
Would it have gone past one?
Well, it's hard to look. So even bad themes usually will make it 1 or 2 years, in because just how production works. I think, especially if they plan for the 3 years,
Well, see, here's the thing though.
you
Like,
wouldn't have gone Borak Call if
Robo Riders was really one
did
year.
they have plans?
Robots was really one
Did they
year.
have plans to do more on either of those? They don't. They don't. Let's say Throwbots were an unexpected success for Lego, which is why they were like, oh, maybe there's probably a reason why Bionicle shares so much in common with them because they were popular enough that they're like, oh, this did a lot of good stuff. Let's you reuse a ton of that. The only thing from Robo Riders they stole was the shape of canister, really.
But my point is those were the most recent Technic themes, really. Not Construction. Construction really doesn't make sense to refer to it at that era. And you look at them, and Voodoo Heads or Boneheads sounds to me like another one-off. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool, but it's not. I agree that there's some. It's not just the sets that made Bionicle, although the sets were a huge part of it. It's the fusion of the sets and the idea, the story,
Because
like if it was, and I think this is part of what Gen 2 gets wrong, is it strips away like this real unique identity. Now, granted, I know why they did it. That unique identity, a lot of it in the beginning was basically just let's take some generic Polynesian culture and scrape off the serial numbers and call it Bionicle. So that's a little bit dubiously ethical, but it totally worked for a starting point, and it was memorable in a way that uh, Bone Crusher and Shaman Face, and I don't know, like whatever you're gonna name these voodoo doll boneheads, it doesn't have the same immediate. Oh,
Aura.
there's a flavor here.
Well, I mean, you look at like something like Throwbots, Robo Riders, Voodoo Heads. All three of those, you know exactly what the theme's about, more or less just from the name. Throwbots, oh, they're robots who throw. Robo Riders, oh, the robots who ride, who are they don't really ride, well, they do. Voodoo Head, oh, they're, uh, you know, all of them like these are words that we understand. Bionicle, what's a Bionicle? Like, immediately my first thought is like, okay, well, first off, it's a term that is very, um, you don't know what it is. So you already got the kind of mystery of what is a Bionicle. You know it is. You could just say it's a weird way of saying biomechanical, or which is how I always used to say, rather than a biological chronicle. But it's a made up word. It's not made up of two normal words. It's a made up word which already exists. And with the Polynesian influence and words that they use for the first year, I think we mentioned this before. One point is the with some of like with those stuff, the reason why a lot of those words are nicer, especially like I think we had a podcast I know where we talked about Makuta's name and why Makuta is a better name than Pterodax, and I think the point was that it has the phonetics of it are real. Like Makuta, the phonetics of how it flows is based on the Maori language, while Pterodax is just a Scrabble leftovers that you go, well, I can make a word. And I think a lot of Bionicle names post essentially the lawsuit or the first 3 years, like even starting with like the Rockshi, you start to lose a lot of those names. Now in the early ones, it's like it's just the Rockshi. Well, those are villains that work for Makuta. They can have weird names. Then you kind of get to the Metro New Years. Well, the Metro are still using the names they had, so you still got like the villains with the weird names. But once you get to like something, let's say like really get to like Fantoka, Mystica, and especially Glatorian, you got like Zesk. You got like I feel like the names start to sound more made up and less like they actually they came naturally. So I think even just like with that might help make things a little bit more I don't know, appealing if you're just looking through a catalog and you see these cool names. And like I said, Zesk is always the one that I kind of compare to when it comes down to what's a good Bionicle name and what's a bad Bionicle name. Something like Karzani, I don't know how. Well, I guess Karzani actually think goes back longer than I think.
It goes at least back to the '04 era with the Karzani plant.
Well, that's the Morkabuza, but well, I guess in the books it was the
Or
Karzani plant.
there is a Karzani though. It's not, maybe it's not the plant. It's
No, I think it actually might be another
is it,
plant, honestly, because it's in one of.
or is it something to do with the protodermis being? It's been a while since my last trawl through Biosector 1. So
Yeah, and I haven't read the books in probably half a decade either, so my memory of that is, and I also skim books, so my memory is very, very faulty with such stuff. But no, like just the for a first impression of a theme, just having something for one, not even just the name, the sound of Bionicle, but I would say just even how it looks. The name Bionicle is a very aesthetically pleasing word because you got the uppercase B. Nothing. I don't know. There's certain words I've just looked at and I could go, that's a good looking word. Like Pterodax is not a good looking word. Bionicle is a very nice looking word. Something like Lezovic's not very nice to look at. It looks very jumbled. Karzani's not a nice looking word, but like Kopaka, like I said, a lot of the early also they got the influence from. They're based on stuff. But I know, like I said, only by Bionicle, I like how that word looks.
that's very Lord of the Rings fan of you, because you're basically saying that, the aesthetics of a word are supremely important. The way that it's just sort of, and that's basically how Tolkien invents Elvish. And
I mean,
I'm not going to say that Maori and Polynesian and stuff is all like exactly the same aesthetics as High Elvish, but
I mean, let's be honest. The Polynesian influence is like the one thing that the word Bionicle is the one thing I don't think that Polynesian influence had anything over. Because that's not based on Polynesian. That's literally just a biological chronicle smushed together. But it was smushed together in a nice enough way that it's just a very. And maybe this is just because I'm so used to the word Bionicle. I've seen it, spoken it, written it so many times that to me it is just a standard word in my vocabulary. But again, I look at it, it's like it's a very symmetrical word for the most part. At least, especially when you have the capital B with the as the only capital, because you got that in the L, that kind of bookend, a nice looking word. It's not hard to say. It's very, I would say, easy to pronounce, and you don't have to question if you're pronouncing it right. Which so many Bionicle names is the question of do we pronounce it right? But like I said, I just really was thinking about that compared to what its original name was with Voodoo Heads, and I'm like, if it had that name, I really don't think it would have lasted as long.
I think if it had had that name, that would have indicated that it wouldn't have had that story, and therefore I totally agree with you. While Bionicle doesn't match the whole Polynesian vibe by itself, it is telling you something a little bit. It's a fusion word. Like, bio makes you think animals. It makes you think, shall we say, South Pacific beautiful island. And a chronicle is something
Mechanical,
man-made.
onical.
It's something that's been created. It's something that's mechanical. Yeah, I mean, you could say biological chronicle. I've always thought of it as more like a contraction of
I
biomechanical.
think we all thought that when we were younger. Now that might have been you and other older brothers telling us younger ones that specifically as the reasoning behind it. I don't know. That one I can't speak on.
But there's still a meshing going on there, where there's it right there in the one word itself. It's like nature and robots together. Whatever the like literal meaning is, you can kind of like vibe, oh, nature and robots. And that's different than voodoo heads. That's different than robo riders. That's different than throwbots. Now, I would say that throwbots maybe is starting to approach it in their art, like the idea of the different worlds that they come from or
Yeah,
the different biomes that they live in, but it hadn't become sort of like a real key core identity thing And then Bionicle was like, no, 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 no. These are living robots. And the whole story thing here is that it's robots living in living on a desert island, but the desert island is on top of the giant robot, but the giant robot has life inside it. And even these individual robots are part flesh and part mechanical. And like that is really the identified, like, okay, here's
You managed
what
to summarize Bionicle essentially down
here's
to
the
like two sentences, like to like a paragraph right there.
here's the flavor of the whole story in just the name. It's a great name that way.
And like, and again, but also like with the words of Bionicle, like the names and such, one thing, a trend that I noticed that they love to do, especially in later years, was use K's and X's a lot more later on. But like the way K's are used early on were always like K followed by a soft vowel, like Kopaka. You know, like I mean he's the main one that uses the K for the main characters, but like I think there's a lot of other names where it's like
No
no
comma,
comma, the
Vakama,
ka, like you know that. But you look
Takua.
at later on when
It's
Lezo,
K and then a
but
vowel.
you look at
That's
later when they start using like Lezovic, you know, neck tan, like it's not, it's used at the after a vowel rather than before a vowel. And you got the X's. So the later Bionicle names always had a bit more of a k, you know, kind of a very
there.
rough sort of name to it, like one that doesn't feel natural to say. And I can say this because I've made a lot of Bionicles, specifically one species of Bionicles who almost all their names have a very kind of that sort of late K in the word after a vowel that always ends up being like a kind of, and even like I mean Licon is kind of well, Licon. Okay, so that one's not too bad. Predac, you got there as well. Uh, but then like the X is like Accelera T9. I guess that's a vehicle name, so that's not a character's name, so it's different. And you could say that the different names are good for different environments, but it's more of just a trend that after they weren't able to use Polynesian names, it just seemed, and but even like it was nice. It was okay when it was the Vizirac, the Borak, and the Rockshi all had K's and like they all had that kind of more, I would say, slightly more difficult name to be, you know, the name was the Baki, but like I said, once it got to like the more good guy characters and just later on where it's like even like I don't know, it just feels like
I
the K's.
think there might be a little bit of a naming thing that you're picking up on, which is that in the Polynesian era, it's if there's a K, it's a K by itself. Very simple, because that's how a K works in most Polynesian languages. It's just a K by itself, no comma. Kopaka. In the Metronui era, it's usually
With a
more like a KH, Rakshi, Likan, um, Nediki. That's maybe
Krekka has got
I
like
don't
a
know if
bunch
that's
of
a great,
K's in there.
but they like to put H's next to their K's. That's kind of the transitional era, and then the final stage is the
Mudaka,
double K,
Sidorak,
Lezo,
Vizirac.
Lezovic.
A lot of K's. It's honestly the way the Broncos got named later. I kind of feel like a lot of it was what even just myself and like Eck picked up on was okay. They use a lot of K's. We don't use C's. We use K's. So we're gonna, if you make a made up word, put a K in there, without actually having the more stuff behind it. But like I said, also where it was just like trying to make words that looked Bionicle-ish rather than sounded Bionicle. And like I said, my prime example, sorry Greg, is always Pterodax. Even though it doesn't have actually like a K in it, it's just got the X at the end. It doesn't feel or look very fitting for the rest of it. Now, in fairness, maybe that works with the character. Like there's certain characters where it works with, but like I said, they'll just the trend. And I know like with Barra Magna, a lot of the names I think kind of more the influence for the names were not. They took influence from I'm trying to remember the, I think like more like what is it? Like Roman style esque naming to some degree, or not like not Roman, but like that sort of era and area. There's like the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, there's a little more
Mediterranean,
fantasy Latin
Latin,
going on with the.
Latin. Yeah, so that's which also changed the vibe of it overall. But like I said, I know a lot of people like credit, you know, I've tried to credit different things to Bionicle's success, whether it be the affordability of, you know, getting characters, the um the promotional and or aesthetic of like the packaging, the art. You got some people say the story, and like what I do really kind of look at all this going like I don't think without one of any of these I don't think it would have been nearly as popular because it does really just feel like it's in a perfect amalgamation of everything that managed to somehow make this really weird buildable action figure line with deep lore work because this I kind of feel like if you had the exact same story but all the names were like much more made up sounding, I don't know if people would have gravitated to all of these Matoran, Taraga, and Toa all on this island if they all had kind of just lame names.
No, I really think the Polynesian cohesiveness. Now, I think that it's fair to say that Lego was right to back away from that when the Polynesian community objected to it being taken so completely. I don't think it's necessarily like unethical in and of itself to use a real world language or languages and sort of transplant them. Like, I don't think that when you read The Lord of the Rings, you're like, oh, Tolkien must hate old English people because he just stole all their stuff for the Rohirrim. And like, oh, and he stole the stuff from the Vikings to make the
Well,
dwarves, and
I
like,
think with
but
sorry,
but it is but I think it is fair to say that if a community objects to you doing that, you shouldn't do that.
yeah,
And so they objected to it, you stop doing that, and that's the right thing to do. But as a result, you kind of, since they didn't go and hire a Tolkien to be on their staff and make up languages, they're sort of in this case of just as amateurs throwing words together and let's hope it sounds
I mean,
right.
don't get me wrong, they were able to hide behind reusing characters all the way into the Mystica and Fantoka era with the same Toa. All the good guys have been using the same names since year one, so they got away with like a lot of the good guys still sounding mostly the same. But you look at other good guys that get brought into line, Axon, Dakar, um, Solek, uh, like a lot of the other like later names that aren't like the main Toa. It's like yeah, they're a very different vibe to that at all. And yeah, no, it's just like I said, to me it's just one of those things where I'm just like it's very as a kid I never would have picked up on that sort of that vibe at all. And like and you say like with the Poland like the Polynesian community, I think like it wasn't even just the fact that they used a lot of the words. I think it was just how they used certain words. And I think the one I remember hearing was that specifically the way they used the word Tohunga was like the biggest offender.
Yeah, it's probably the sort of thing where if they had the right person doing it the right way, things could have gone quite a bit differently, but they didn't. So we're talking about, a hypothetical alternate universe that nobody
I mean,
actually lives
I'm not
in.
going to judge him too much because half my Bionicle names of later years of me going to Google Translate and going, okay, what's this word translated to the Maori language and seeing if it looks good or works good for me. It's very obvious we could tell what names are Google translated and which names are just jumble of words in my plethora of names I have. So just a little hiccup there. But it's just like I said, I just thought it was just kind of interesting. So, and I think that's one reason why something uh like I said later, the further waves you get, it's just like the names just kind of just lose a little bit. So maybe not the most deep, crazy revelation out there, but definitely adds and I think just for the name at least for it, because like I said earlier, is the first initial thing like that. The name and the art essentially is the very first thing you see before you even get your hands on the toy. Well, maybe I don't know. If
Yeah,
you
I
might not
mean
be
it's
reading, you might just look at the toy and not read it. So
Well, it's a little bit like the saying, "Don't judge a book by its cover." The reason that saying exists is because that's what people do. It's a natural instinct that you want to make a good first impression, and the first impression of a Lego set is what's the box art and what are the words on it.
I'm trying to I'm trying to think if there's any like good parallels to a theme that, let's say, didn't have a great name that could have been better. Like that could have had like a better line if had maybe had a different name. I don't think Lego's ever had a bad job naming things. Like it's usually pretty self-explanatory. You got Ninjago, they're ninjas who go.
See, I would argue that a big part of why I took a long time to have any interest at all in Ninjago is that Ninja Go
Was
just
a
sounded really
cartoony.
yeah, sounded pretty lame to me. So
I mean, again,
it took a long time. So like I had to like look at the sets and kind of like learn bits of lore here and there, and then it's like, okay, yeah, no, this is cool stuff.
so
Maybe it's I'm past the target age for it, and I'm never really going to get into it because it's a little too much to get into. But like I can appreciate Ninjago now in a way that took me a long time because I just didn't love the
I mean, I
name.
guess that's the sort of thing about the names, like if Bionicle had gone Voodoo heads, because like Ninjago, obviously, I would say it was targeted for a younger demographic than Bionicle, because Bionicle was always like preteen, while Ninjago was more like middle school sort of thing, or like before you're like Bionicle was definitely targeted a little bit more towards like early teens, like they wanted it's Technic, which has always had a higher age bracket. And I'm like, if you had Voodoo heads as the name, would it have been a younger, slightly younger audience being interested in Bionicle? Because the slightly older would have looked at the name the way we looked at Ninjago, of just being like, that doesn't sound good at all. And now this is the one case where something like Galador, it had a great, actually a really good name, and I would say relatively good art style and or like ideas about. I mean, let's be honest, the only problem with Galador had really came down to was the sets were terrible. Although I will say, um, I do love Gorm as a set, just the design of the character, like that is still. But again, Galador also comes out as a the only other sort of buildable figures you had at that point were your Bionicles and maybe a Throwbot or two. And then Galador comes out and you're like, oh, now I have to throw humans into this size scale of characters. That's how I always also looked at it too. Was just, oh crap, I don't have to throw a human into this by having Nick. It was terrible.
Yeah, I like the idea of Galador more than I like the sets. Like if it had been like a fig scale theme with play sets and
It
like
probably would have
it
actually been
was
pretty
like sort
decent.
of a like think of it as sort of like time cruisers, but if it were, you
Serious?
know, like if it had heroes instead of just Dr. Cyber and Tim, like if it had like a Dash figure and like I think Galador would have made a great minifigure theme like that. Like think of like Gorm being
An
like
ogle.
um yeah, almost like an ogle, but like with like a robotic arm, like the collectible
It
minifigs, or like or almost like a space Vladek or like something like a Zerg. Like I think it could have worked as a really
look.
cool sci-fi fantasy, but not castle or space at all kind of a
Yeah, I mean,
theme.
let's also be honest. Zerg and Gorm were cut from the exact same cloth of campy, badass looking villain. Of they look great, but they're probably really campy.
Yeah, no, there's definitely
Power Rangery vibe going on with
some
them.
shared genetics going on.
And you know, that actually just alone thinking about the villain is kind of crazy to think that a theme, Bionicle, all about the action figures, doesn't even have one for the main bad. Like the fact that they didn't give Makuta a set until 2003. Now I know the whole idea, and I think that the whole idea, that fact Makuta was just the embodiment of chaos and destruction as a theme for Lego, was something I think was went over so many people's heads, because like just the idea that, like, yes, the villain embodies chaos and destruction. Not that destruction is necessarily bad on its own, but the chaotic, but it's the chaotic nature of it and how it can get out of control. And the fact that they go, you know what? You can break your own set. You can pretend to be Makuta. Like they didn't. I really feel like they purposely didn't give you Makuta because they were like, well, you don't need him. Him being a figure would take away from him. And let's be honest, they only made him a figure when he became the big bad of a movie.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. I think it's almost the sort of thing where it's like, when you've got like a kid show, but like a really good kid show is going to have stuff for the adults too.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about because kids just need to know Makuta's the bad guy behind all the behind all the Rahi. And but like the older kids, the teenagers, if they're parents, and it's like, oh, it's taking all your sets apart. Like that's a pretty cool idea. Like it's meta, and you don't need it to get the story, but if you do get it, it gives the story depth, which is the kind of thing that makes it, hang on for kids as they grow up and sort of move out of the target
I
demographic.
mean, you look at like the villains of Bionicle from the first 2 years, nothing outside of the presence of Makuta, who isn't even present technically, nothing is inherently evil. The Rahi aren't evil, they're just basically sick and lashing out. They just essentially the Borok aren't inherently evil. And that's made clear pretty early. Even when you don't know much about the Borok's backstory, you just know the Bayrak aren't evil. They're just trying to clean. And that there's all and it was obvious that there was more to them that we were getting told, but it was just like they're not evil. The Rahi aren't evil. They're just being misused at the wrong time. Like they're just being manipulated. And it's for a theme for like a toy theme for something for kids. The fact that the first 2 years, all the villains were essentially stuff that isn't necessarily evil. Like there was no like true evil. Like and honestly, you look at like Monog, one of the most evil character, the only like truly evil character outside of like Makuta is Akmu, and he's just a little jerk, essentially. He's worse than all the Rocky, honestly. And I don't know, it's just looking back, it's just really weird that a toy line just basically said, yeah, all our villains for the first 2 years technically aren't even bad guys from a certain point of view.
It's a
They're mis
it's a very PG-13 or PG, not even PG-13, just a very PG, family-friendly kind of a decision
but
to
it's also
make.
very, I would say,
And
mature, just saying evil can creep into anything. Because Lewa gets infected and a Karana in both years. And it's just like, yeah, anyone can be infected by evil. You just have to be stronger than that, whatever it is that's tempting you or getting into you. And just, I don't know, it's just very interesting that the villain wasn't really, there's no real villain there. And which is ironic because when we were younger, we didn't have most of the villains. So at least us younger brothers were just doogie woogies and just these giant uh humanoid things. I don't know.
we had to get creative with having bad guys. The robots were helpful, and
Robo Rider in Joker
uh,
in Zactez case, the Robo Rider,
perhaps
the Onyx.
yeah, perhaps they fight each other sometimes. Like you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So no, it's interesting, especially when you put that nature of Makuta of being a non-corporeal being essentially, and just a more of a force of nature, and you mix him in with a name that not only is phonetically pleasing to hear, but also when you say it the right way, it just sounds really creepy. Like the Makuta is the very. Let's be honest. I suspect whenever they were like basically looking through Polynesian words or such, and because I don't know if Makuta directly is a word or it's like it's derived from one, but I feel like who basically came up with it was just like, okay, that sounds right. That sounds good.
It's one of the right choices they made, as they did with most of the names at the
Well, like
start of the
you look at the
run.
name like Pohatu. Okay, just by the name Pohatu, I'm pretty sure most people can tell. Okay, he's one of the funner ones because he got the P. Like, there's just certain letters for the like for English speakers give off different vibes than others. And P specifically, you're not gonna if it starts with a P, you're probably not gonna take it very seriously. Pumpkin, like pie, pineapple, like there's just something about peas in the English language, I would say aren't very serious. Like something like Tahu is very Onua, Kopaka, like these are a lot more sterner sounding names. But Pohatu, yeah, no, that name, you can't tell me Pohatu is the stoic one. Gen 2, I am looking at you.
I'm trying to come up with an obvious counterexample by thinking of Lord of the Rings names, but the first thing I think of that starts with a P is Pippin, and then like the first Elvish word that starts with a P that I can think of is Perivil, which means hobbits.
I'm just
So
saying.
I haven't got like a counterexample ready to
But I mean,
hand
you also think
here.
about what colors are associated with P. Pink and purple, especially for younger boys, those aren't very serious colors. So anything that comes with like P, so I'm like, I don't know if that was intentional, that they just thought the name Poitou sounded more fun than the others, or this is all just revisionist history in my mind. But just like that, again, that's another name that's like, again, a really nice sounding name, but also fits the character exceptionally well. And that's like with most of them. But yeah, no. So like I said, what's in a name, right?
It's it was a well chosen name, and notably, Lego's still kind of protective of that trademark. They know they've got something
It's just
there,
how to use
even if
it.
they can't figure out how to use it or what to do with it. We'll probably keep getting a trickle of,
Tahoos.
hopefully more than just Tahoos, but at least a trickle of Tahoos. Uh, for a while until either the Zillennials like get so old they're not buying it, or they figure out what to do with
Best
it.
case scenario, I feel like we were going to get a T.O.A Mata figure sprinkled in like classic space figures over the course of the next decade, is what I expect the best out of this.
I mean, I'm here for it.
I'll take it. The fact I'm like, I'll be honest, me and Ek have been calling for the Collecto minifig for I don't know so many years now that I'm like, okay, it's exactly what I would expect, so I'm happy. But let me just get that little hiccup out. Anyways, I think it was a fun little chat. So thank you all for listening. I have been your host Onvermel, and this has been the T.O.A podcast, and we are retiring from the night.